siblings who are inseparable.
Thank you, Dean. Judy, tell us about this farm that we're all looking at right now.
Well,
Tell us about the history of it, if you would. Let's start with that.
I'm Judy Ackley, and I am the eldest of 5 sisters. And we all grew up down the road, about a quarter of a mile, maybe half a mile, on Empire Farms. Anyway, my first recollections.
Well, let me just say something then. I came across a very interesting article some time ago about the history of the farm in the 19th century, before your family bought it. And there was a connection with the Astor family, the Astors in West Copake. John Jacob Astor's grandson married a local woman and established a farm and a grand house in West Copake. He and his wife had no children. And the consequence was that a lot of their money went to his wife's family and meaning his in-laws. He had a couple of brothers-in-law who worked for him. And so one of them bought what is now known as the Empire Farm, and started a racetrack there for trotters. And then his brother bought it from him, and then we come down to the Ackleys, and your father had the track. Do I have it right?
Yes, he did have a track. Yes. And Howard is right. Empire Farms was probably constructed in the mid-19th century by the Deinhardts, Bill and Delbert Deinhardt, who were also related to the Langdons. And when they were there, they raised standard-bred horses in what we knew as the cow barns. Empire Farm was quite well known for standard-bred stock, particularly for mares. And they were also known to far and wide New York State, and I think, I don't know for certain, that Empire Farms may have been named Empire Farms because of the Deinhardts and the standard-bred stock that they had, and their ability to go race all over New York State. So,
what are your earliest memories of the farm?
I'm sorry?
What are your earliest memories of the farm?
My earliest memories. I can recall, and this would go back into the early 1940s, maybe 1943, 44. I can recall very clearly walking down to the cow barn, passing turkeys, chickens, and God knows what, just to be able to see all the cows in the barn. My father milked about 40 cows. They were Holsteins, half registered, half grades. Grades are non-registered cows. And we also had heifers, and we had calves. So I think at that time there was probably a total of 75 stock on the farm. My father, during Second War also, and I forgot to tell Howard this when he was doing an interview, he raised pigs, as a lot of farmers did back then. And I won't go into that now, but he had occasion to have them get out every now and then, and they were, have you ever tried to herd a pig? Anyway, those are my earliest recollections. There also, if you want me to go on.
Well, I was going to say, Nancy Fuller talks about that her early playmates were the workers the children of the workers on the farm, and you kind of had something like that too.
my sister Marilyn, who was here tonight, and I would play with, we had two men, they used to call them hired men on a farm. That's not disparaging, that's the way it was. And so they worked with my dad. They also worked with Nancy's father, Jim Fuller, who worked on a farm when both my father and Jim were quite young. Anyway, there were two families, the Schutzes and the Tones. And my sister Marilyn and I, you talked about, kind of being isolated up on Tubbs home. And we were down the street, so we weren't in the middle of Copac like Langdon's were. So anyway, we would make our own fun and have a good time at it. So Marilyn and I'd leave the house early in the morning, and this was generally in the spring, summer, and fall. And we'd meet up with Roger and Larry, and we'd spend the day just getting into mischief, or we were very innovative. There was one time when we had a circus. We had a circus, we got it all set up and had one person come, that was Johnny Wilkins. But anyway, it was that type of thing. We created our own fun, just like Dean said they did.
And you were friends with these two boys, Larry
Yes.
and Roger?
Yes.
And you always got along, there were no problems, you never got mad
Oh
at
yeah,
them, right?
once in a while we had a little tizzy here and there. I got angry with Roger at one point. I mean, he was being a pest. And we had this chicken house that sat under the trees, and there weren't too many chickens in there, but I knew that would be a good place to ask Roger if he'd like to go over there. He went in there, and I locked him in. And I'm afraid that I got into a great deal of trouble for that from his mother. So yeah, we did. We pulled pranks. We had a lot of fun. We did a lot of dangerous stuff that probably would scare people to death, but it didn't.
Did you ever help out on the farm, like maybe with a tractor or something?
I did. This would have been in the early 50s, I think. And I was in my early teens, and my father, because I was pretty much willing to help out or do things if he asked, plus I was also the recipient of a wonderful horse, so I was more acclimated towards a farm, I think, than some of my sisters. As far as helping out, driving a tractor or that sort of thing. I will go back and say I remember clearly back in the 40s, and this was during the Second War, when gasoline was rationed, even for farmers. My father had two large percherons, and I can remember him putting me up on one of those horses, as huge as they were, hanging onto a wiffle tree, and he'd drive them down into what we used to call the South Center Field, and what a lot of you might know as where the racetrack was. And at that time, he would plow he'd plow disc harrow, whatever, plant corn and other products down the road. But I remember that clearly, and evidently it made an impression because I have never forgotten it. So fast forward a little bit, in the 50s, early 50s, maybe I was 13, 14 years old, he'd come to me periodically and ask if I would rake hay, or if I would consider one time, rake hay was no issue, but it was always on the side hill. You know that hill, Fuzzy?
Oh, yes.
That awful hill. Well, anyway, there was one incident on that hill that I'll never forget because I thought I was dead, gone forever. My father was combining oats, and we borrowed Grant Langdon's, Sook Langdon's dump truck. And it had hydraulic brakes.
Yeah, I remember that.
You do. I remember it too, Fuzzy. Anyway, it had hydraulic brakes, and I'm driving, and I get up there so the oats would blow back into the dump part of the truck. And I don't know what happened. I must have taken my foot off a clutch or a brake, but it stalled. And if you know anything about hydraulics, you stall something hydraulic and you haven't got any brakes, you haven't got anything. And I'm like this on the side of the road, or side of the hill, and it was, I could see my life pass before my face. Pull the wheel, pull the wheel, pull the wheel. And it worked. For some reason it worked. Anyway, I sat there and I nearly passed out, and my father looked down and said, "You all right, Judy?" I think I was. I had a couple of other instances where I would help, they'd make hay on that same hill. And we had a couple of old trucks. One was called the Old Bee, and the other was something else. They always had a stick on the floor, and your brake was down there, and everything else, and it was wide open, and there was a hole in the bottom of the hole in the floor, you could see everything. Anyway, I proceeded to go down that hill on that road with that truck in first gear. And it just about made it. Twice I came off that hill with no brakes, once in a car, and once in that truck. And I said to Dad, after a couple of incidents, "I'll do most anything, but I'll tell you what, I am not driving off that hill in anything ever again." And I didn't. For years, I did not do that.
Judy, you told me about an incident. Was it a chicken named Spitfire that?
Oh, definitely. We got to tell that story. Anyway, my dad and Dean's grandfather, and this is back in the 40s when AI was not used. Anyway, no way.
I wasn't even born yet. Don't worry about it.
AI was not used, and Courts Wells and my father co-owned a very large, nasty bull
Oh, it wasn't a chicken, I'm sorry.
by the name of Spitfire. You ever hear about that?
I knew they co-owned a bull before. I didn't know the name.
He was awful. Anyway, they co-owned a bull together, and he really was. His conformation was beautiful. And he was registered because Courts Pels and my father had registered cows. So, it was time for Spitfire to come down to Empire Farm. And they would usually let bulls out with cows, or they would take cows individually to a bull. And this bull was up, my sister and I and Amy and Mary would know, outside the old horse barn, or near the shop. It was somewhere in there, in the back, down below. Anyway, he was in there, and he was quite, when he was on the farm, he'd get out periodically, and that didn't bode well with anyone. So my father said, "Well, now I know what we're going to do. Well, I'm going to get some telephone poles, and we'll build a bullpen." Well, in all their wisdom, they built the bullpen right outside the cow barn. And they put Spitfire in there, and he proceeded to get out one day, and to make a long story short, he ran down through the middle of the cow barn and chased my father up into a haymow. And he wasn't the only bull, but we had a couple of others. There was always an incident here or there. I remember one time when I think it was the last bull Dad had. Maybe my sisters remember this too. The bull got out, and I noticed my father was gone, and he said he was going to see what he could do about it. And I looked out the window, and there he is on my horse. Hurting. I mean, it makes perfect sense that he would do it, but I was not concerned about anything but the fact the horse was going to get gored. Anyway, that's neither here nor there, but these memories stick in your mind a lot of times.
You did get into town once in a while. Could you talk about going into
Pardon me?
going into the hamlet? Could you talk about that?
Oh, sure. I think probably in the mid-50s. I guess it was after I went to high school, or maybe even before that.
You talked about Hedges' store, and you liked
Oh,
going in
Hedges
there.
store. Oh, okay, Hedges store. Okay, this goes back into our younger years. Maybe Marilyn remembers this too. But Hedges had a store where the deli is.
Yes.
And I remember Mrs. Mason and Mrs. Hedges and the interior of that store. They had a bank of, maybe Vanna remembers too. They had a bank of cookie bins. Remember, if anybody remembers those cookie bins, they were like boxes, but they had little doors on them. And they were full of cookies, all different kinds. And it was such a pleasure to be able to, our mother would say, well, we'll go to Hedges. And we did, and then the highlight of the whole trip was to reach in the bin and ask for a cookie if we could have one. And to pull out this marshmallow covered thing. Coconut on top. Oh boy, was it good. Did I have one?
All homemade.
Oh, yeah.
Judy, thank you very much. If we have some time afterwards, we're going to come back and ask Judy to talk somewhat about the phone company that her family owned. Okay? But we'll move on to